if you're reading the play, you will get that nuanced understanding of how these people are paired. And that, yeah, if you really get rid of one of them, you feel like the play cannot stand the way it's standing right now. If you get rid of Othello, I mean, he's our protagonist also, it's like going to be like, what is going on? So two people that complement each other, and their presence makes the other person's presence important. If we look at Iago as a literary device, okay, symbolically, and we kind of think of him as Othello's alter ego. You know what an alter ego is? Your alter ego that you always like, shh, don't come up, right? It's like a little devil here on your shoulder. So in a way, kind of Iago shows something that is already in Othello, but he's always suppressing. So, and also, as I told you before, in Shakespeare, the characterization and the actors are so intertwined that when you're on stage, this actor playing Iago would switch and be Othello, and the one Othello would switch and be Iago. And so they're very intertwined in that kind of sense when they keep on switching back and forth. Again, why do we have this opposition? We have an opposition over here, Iago versus Othello. What is the idea here? Is that ultimately throughout the play, we're going to see that though ostensibly these two men look completely different from each other, once you kind of start dig and look at things in a more thorough sense, they have a lot of characterization that are kind of similar to each other. The way Iago eavesdrops on people, Othello is relegated to that position at the end of the play. He goes and eavesdrops on Desdemona. Iago says that she will basically cheat on you the same way she cheated on her father, and then later on Othello thinks the same thing. And so again, so there are a lot of things once you kind of get more into the analysis of the play, you will see that there are a lot of similarities between these people in the language. I mean, especially that Othello's language is always elevated. We said Othello is the only character who always speaks in what? Poetry, right? And everyone else switches back and forth, prose, poetry, prose, poetry. But again, he's exotic, right? He's our hero, and Shakespeare gives that to the hero. Hero needs to speak in poetry. So, but at the end, he's still speaking in poetry, but in a way that kind of, you know, just kind of makes no sense. So yeah, in terms of the content of what he's saying, it would resemble Iago's way of seeing things. All right. How does Act 1, Scene 3 end? It begins with darkness. It also ends with darkness. What happens? Something very crucial, you guys, happens right before they go to Cyprus. What happens? Who wants to tell me what happens? What happens here? We have these people, they're getting ready to go to Cyprus. Cyprus is under the threat of the Ottomans invading at any moment. They all need to go to Cyprus. He's the head of the army. Of course, Iago's going, Cassio's going, Rodrigo's going. Desdemona, what did she tell her dad? What did she tell her dad? Why is she going with her husband? Because as a wife right now, she owes that loyalty to her husband. And this is what we said about this kind of society. A woman stays loyal to her father, to her parents, and then once that kind of transfer happens and she goes to her husband's house, then she owes loyalty to her husband because he's basically now the kind of other father figure who's responsible for her, right? So she also goes. Everyone goes to Cyprus. All of these main characters. What happens right before that? What is the plot that is being executed here? What's happening? What are they plotting behind the scenes? Rodrigo and Iago, what are they? This is, by the way, Act 1. So if you don't know, then it means you'd never even read Act 1 and that you're all here just for the quiz that you're all going to fail in. Like, yeah, because That's going to happen. So what is going on, you guys? In Act 1. Act 1. You're students of literature. Did everybody read Act 1? Raise your hand if you read Act 1. And be honest. I want honesty over here. What about you guys? Why didn't you read Act 1? It's not about my lecture. It's about a syllabus. I shared the syllabus with you on LMS under topic 12 2 weeks ago. Yeah? I told you guys. I shared a syllabus with you. You already know that we're working on Othello. We're working on this book. Why did you not read Act 1? You already know we're working on Othello. It's not about my lectures. Again, guys, you are university students. You are college students. The professor's job in class to give you a theoretical framework to make you understand the sophistication of the work. The professor here is not a storyteller. I am not a campfire storyteller. Do you know what a campfire storyteller is? We all sit around a fire together, like in a camp, like for little children, and I start telling you a story. This happens, and that goes, and he falls in love with her, and then he murders her. That's not what my job is over here. We're on a much higher level, supposedly. And as a college student, my job is just to make things convenient and accessible to you in a convenient way. Your job is to do all the work. So please, can you leave your high school mentality back at your house? What is the high school mentality? Is that I'm going to come and stuff information in your brain. I'm not going to do that. I respect you enough as an adult college student to not do that. You need to think for yourself. So respect your position enough and do the readings that you're supposed to do. So we have two characters here who are plotting against Othello right before they all leave to Cyprus. And he says, put money in thy purse. Iago to Rodrigo. They're trying to frame him, right? So they're up to no good. And so the act basically ends with seeing this sense of darkness. And then the stage is set up for the tragedy. So we know moving forward that things are going to only be what? Unraveling. So we kind of have like a beginning love story kind of conflict. Othello speaks a little bit, but then from this moment we really only have things sliding down, right? And again, there is Iago's first soliloquy. Can someone tell me what a soliloquy is? You've studied this in AA 100A. What's your name? Nada. Go ahead, Nada. Please be loud. In a way, he's not really giving it to the audience, but the audience are there anyway. So what is the character doing? This is kind of a monologue where you're basically speaking to yourself. You are speaking inside your head, but you're verbalizing that out loud, right? And so Iago is really speaking to himself as if he's speaking inside his head, which kind of says to us as an audience, as people who are reading this play, that this might be the most sincere thing that we get from Iago. I am not what I am. I wear my heart on my sleeve. Etc. We don't buy any of that. That is something that he's saying to people, that he's actually addressing the audience. In a soliloquy, he's speaking to himself. And so that is like the moment of truth. What is he saying in his soliloquy? Again, what is a soliloquy? It's a monologue where a speaker, the character, is speaking to himself. He is really showing his most intimate ideas, whatever that is, ruminations that are going in his head. And so it is the most honest speech that we would hear. So it reveals his motivation, as I say here, and his plan to use Cassio to bring Othello down, right? He knows these people. And again, if we are to watch his soliloquy, we see that this man is really devious. He's a very devious person. And he says that I will basically use Othello's open nature, and I will use Cassio's daily beauty, he says, or I mean, Cassio is just such a gentleman, and I will basically, just destroy them both. But Cassio, supposedly, he really doesn't care about him. He's just a casualty. He's just going to try to use him to get to Othello. He said, I'm going to use Cassio's smooth appearance and his manners against him. Now, if we look at several critics, again, we said we're looking at this in a critical way. If we are to look at several critics and what they think of Iago's soliloquy, we have Coleridge, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who was a Shakespearean critic and also was a poet. I think you've heard of him when we discussed, what's his name? Not Shelley, Wordsworth in A to 30A. We said that Coleridge and Wordsworth, they wrote poetry together. And so basically he says that Coleridge says, how can I describe Iago's character, Iago's actions? He says the way that he behaves, I would consider it, he says, the motive hunting of a motiveless malignity. So later on, this phrase became a prominent one in the analysis, a staple, basically a phrase in Shakespearean criticism. Now, basically, the malignity is a pure destructive desire. You just have within you, this pure destructive desire to do harm to people. You're a psychopath, basically, all right? And to him, to Coleridge, that apparently is the reason why Iago wants to destroy Othello. Nothing else. It's not about the promotion. It's not about, probably race is more important here. However, this is a very despicable man. This man is very cynical. He hates everyone around him, and especially, of course, if he sees someone in a position of power that he thinks he shouldn't be in that place, it's probably going to be even worse. So a pure desire to destroy. And for example, if you look at Cassio's daily beauty or his smooth appearance, is the reason I hate him. What kind of psycho are you? And he wants to get him murdered because of that. Just because Cassio seems to be very cool. Everyone likes Cassio, so I want to destroy Cassio. Again, in a modern sense, he's apparently, I'm not even going to try to analyze him in a modern sense, because I told you before, when we were discussing the intro and we talked about a play versus a novel, I told you that when you look at plays, the characterization and the representation is over the top. It's overdone. It's on a very big scale. So the characters are more like caricatures. They're not really like people with real psychologies. They're kind of drawn without a real sense of detail. So each character would be representing a bigger thing than just representing how a person in a daily life behaves. And the catastrophes and the things that happen are kind of impossible to happen to a one person in the kind of realist sense. So yeah. Anyway, so he's a Machiavellian, a Machiavel. What does it mean to be a Machiavel? Have you ever heard of Machiavel? Yeah? Yeah. الغاية تبرر الوسيلة. Yeah, anybody? Yeah. So he's a devious manipulator. And he basically constructs those plots because he knows those people, and so he kind of just kind of has the upper hand in manipulating those people and using them. Now, let's see. Okay, yeah, we're done, I think, with this. Let's move on to our next set of slides. And now, like I said, we really have the perfect what stage that is set up for a tragedy. And that's exactly what we want over here. Okay. So in chapter 2 of your book, you know which book it is, deals with honesty, difference, men and women. So we're going to look at all of these questions. How do I make this bigger? I'm trying to remember. Did he do this? Did he? Don't talk to each other. What did he do? How do I make this bigger? Does anybody know? No. Oh, it's here? No. Oh, okay. Okay, guys. So we have the change of setting. Now we move to Cyprus. Okay? And now we're moving to Cyprus, and there is this disorder in the sea. We already talked about this. Of course, Shakespeare is going to use imagery from the Mediterranean, from Venice, from Cyprus. So the sea can be either a sign and a symbol of prosperity, making money with all the trade, your connections to the world, but it also can be a sign of danger. Other people invading you, you're an easy target to be invaded by the sea. And also a sea, if you want to look at it in terms of a metaphor, it can be basically a sign of, if there is turmoil, if there is basically, if there is basically a lot of waves and stuff, it can be a sign of something that is just not stable in the world that the characters inhabit. Okay, which is true because it's all alarm and confusion, and they're about to engage the Turkish fleets that are waiting for them. And so Othello, Desdemona, and all these crew basically arrive in Cyprus, and we know in the background that we have two people also plotting against Othello. And so, again, the storm. What does it stand for? Again, it's a premonition. Of what? It's a sign. A sign that basically the world of these characters is not stable. Like, remember, Arabs would want to go in the past on a journey, and then a crow shows up, and they're like, oh, that's a bad sign. Maybe we should not travel today. So those were signs. Why? Because they use the environment, their environs around them, to kind of seek whatever knowledge about the energy that is around, okay? And so here we know that the sea in this state of storm is basically a sign of, I mean, I'm thinking actually of The Tempest, a play by Shakespeare. It's not a hurricane. It is a hurricane. Is it a hurricane? I think probably Shakespeare is one of the very first playwrights to even put in like a hurricane in one of his plays, because hurricanes were not something that used to happen prior to probably like the 18th, 17th hundred, because they all have to do with like the climate changing. That is the reason why they happen right now. I mean, they're even becoming more frequent. They were not even as frequent as they're becoming right now. And so that is very interesting that he uses nature for that purpose. Okay. Now we see Othello in a love scene with his wife. Finally, they're away from Venice, okay? And so they get to enjoy some alone time together without the whole world kind of, you know, just intruding. And Othello says after that moment with Desdemona, if it were now to die, it were now to be most happy, okay? So we have this expression of courtly love that he expresses toward his wife, his devotion to her. He says, if I die after this moment, I would be the most happy, all right? And also there's a pun over here, because the word die can mean both. It can mean that you actually die, experience death, or in this sense, if you are in a romantic setting, it probably can mean that you experience orgasm, which kind of means that Othello and Desdemona's relationship, of course, has probably a sexual side to it. But they're married. And so it's not the same way that Iago wants you to kind of perceive or think. So we have courtly love, we have a platonic relationship, but also it has that other side to it. Okay. Now, again, there's more plotting on that, basically from Iago. And we know that he's a gifted actor. We talked about it. I even compared him to Joker, if you remember. And the audience are just kind of baffled by him, and they're following every move that he's making. And we know that Othello is becoming his victim, and we're seeing how he's going to bring about basically Othello's downfall. Yeah, I think we talked plenty about the charm of Iago, so no need to talk more about that. Like I said before, we enjoy his energy. He's really cunning, manipulative, and we're kind of like following, like, what is he up to now? What is he going to do right now, right? But it doesn't mean that you agree with what he's doing, right? And yeah, he's more kind of interesting than Othello. Now, if we look at the pro-Othello views, we said we looked at Coleridge, and he said he kind of is analyzing Iago. Now, we're going to look at some critics analyzing Othello's behavior. Why does Othello do what he does? Or why does Othello not realize what Iago is up to? And all of that. So, pro-Othello views in A.C. Bradley. A.C. Bradley is a Shakespearean also scholar, and he basically said, he's known, like he's a very famous Shakespearean a critic, and he had a very major work in 1904, which is like 3 million years ago, on Shakespeare. And he said that Othello has this very open and passionate character that basically Iago takes advantage of. And so he would have had a happily ever after, okay, with Desdemona, if it hadn't been for whom? Iago. So Iago enters in, and so he, you know, Othello becomes a tragic figure. So he murders his wife. We don't basically think that it's fine that he murders his wife, but we kind of understand where it all goes wrong and how he does that. So according to Bradley, he says, this play is the undoing of the noble Moor by the devilish cunning of Iago. So the moment you just kind of phrase it that way, the moment you're phrasing it that way, what are you suggesting? That the tragedy is brought by what? Yeah, I'm waiting for you guys to tell me. By what? External factors? Yeah? So he's basically taking Othello from this entire equation of any responsibility. He says this would have been, take Iago out of the play, this would have been a happily ever after. Put Iago in, this is a disaster. So it is the undoing, destroying basically the undoing of the noble Moor by the devilish cunning Iago. Do you agree? Do you agree with A.C. Bradley's view? Yeah, tell me why. Why not? Mm-hmm. Good. So there would be something else. Not necessarily a character. There would always be something else. Why? Because Othello himself has something in him that is ready to respond to tragedy. Now, is it fair to say that it is something that he has by nature all along? We don't know. Why? Because we know him in this setting. We know him in this setting. In this particular racist setting that we know of, this is how Othello responds to things, right? He's internalizing. He's on an unconscious level. On a conscious level, he doesn't know that all these people hate him. He kind of feels like he's fine, things are fine, but on an unconscious level, he's internalizing. And again, the more he's internalizing, the more disastrous things can be, because he's not aware of that. So in a way, if we look at him, and again, this is a very romantic way of looking at this, the happily ever after, external evil. It's not external evil per se. Yes, the evil is there, but things are more complex than just saying it's totally external. Now, if we look at an anti-Othello view in T.S. Eliot, do you guys know who T.S. Eliot is? Yeah. Yeah? Yeah, but what else? Like, he's famous for being what? Yeah, a poet. He's an English-American 20th century modernist poet. You should know that. Okay, T.S. Eliot. He wrote That Wasteland, the most famous poem in the history of modernism. So T.S. Eliot said that no, wait a minute. This is a man who has a tendency to self-dramatize himself, and that is evidence in the Othello music. He always wants to kind of show like he's bigger than, not bigger than people, that he's kind of trying to show that he's superior. No. Trying to kind of exert that kind of acceptance, that kind of reassurance through showing how good enough he is. So he tries to kind of, show his qualities and how good he is to those people who will never accept him. And that is a known fact, even in the study of psychology. People who suffer from low self-esteem, they never go to the right people. They never go to the people who just accept them. They kind of would always go to those who would make them feel worse about themselves. And those who make them feel worse about themselves are people who have ego issues. And so you are a person suffering from low self-esteem and insecurities, and the person in front of you at some point rejects you and hates you. And you're like, no, please accept me. I love you. Stay with me, right? You probably don't even love them, but it says something about you, that you want that person to accept you and see you as a person who is worth something. So you kind of see your self-worth. You don't see your self-worth from within. You see your self-worth from an external factor, but in a way, you kind of, like deep down on an unconscious level, you don't even know that this is exactly what is going on with you. And so Othello over here, he's a person who, according to Eliot, and then according to F.R. Levi, okay, if we look at Levis or Levi versus Bradley, Bradley says it's external. Levi says, hey, come on, this view of looking at Othello is a very sentimental one. Which is sentimental? Oh, this would have been a very amazing love story if it had him in. He's like, this is sentimental. What is sentimental? Atifi, right? They're kind of being oversimplistic. He says, Shakespeare's tragedy, when you, Bradley, when you do that, you're displacing Shakespeare's tragedy, you're displacing the center from Othello onto Iago. And we know that the main character here is Othello. So you're putting too much emphasis on Iago, then you're giving him the role of the what? That villain, the protagonist. And he doesn't really see him quite as a villain, because a villain is like a whole round character. complex one. And so he says, our main character is Othello, hence the title. And so here we're looking at three kind of different views. Bradley says that basically Othello has readiness to respond. He says he has this readiness to respond to tragedies, to bad situations like that. Now, if we look at Levi versus Wilson Knight, Wilson Knight is the one who coined the Othello music. If you remember, we talked about him in the very beginning. We said he coined the music that we see in the play, the intonations, all of that as the Othello music, but especially Othello's own speeches. Those are like mostly, but then the grand music and the grand poetry of the entire play is also the Othello music. He says, listen, this music, this Othello music, should be understood in a more critical sense. He says it's an indication of self-approving, self-dramatization. Othello uses that in order to cover up for something that is lacking. The reason why he speaks in this grand poetry all the time is to kind of give that nudge to yourself. I'm doing okay, I'm like great. You're self-approving, okay? And self-dramatization, which is an essential thing to Othello's makeup, he says. And it remains so until the very end, which is very true. Now, according to Levi, he says that Othello, for example, when he believes that his wife cheated on him, there's a handkerchief, there's the entire situation. If you know your wife enough, if you talk to her, if you kind of try to know IAGO, that he's a manipulative person and how he's been plotting it, so he's not noticing these details, those subtle details around him. So right away, IAGO knows, if I present the situation in front of Othello, he will believe it. Because he says, I know how Othello's nature is. Now, which is true. Now, if we look at it in a more critical way, as Levi says, he says that what happens in this situation is not really the result of IAGO being this diabolical intellect. What does diabolical mean? A person who's like cunning, right? Conniving, very smart. Not sure that he's very smart. The thing is, any person who would do something similar to this would garner that kind of reaction from Othello. Why? Because according to him, Othello has readiness to respond. So in this sense, IAGO only functions as a catalyst. Do you know what a catalyst is? محفز, right? So he is simply a catalyst. He is simply a mechanism that is necessary to make Othello go crazy. It's just like he is ready, you're already standing on the cliff. I just push you off the cliff, right? But you're already there by yourself. And that is exactly what's happening with Othello. So we cannot put too much emphasis on IAGO's behavior and giving him so much credit on being this genius. I mean, he's smart, but he's not a genius. And again, at the same time, we do this mistake, then we're kind of de-emphasizing and demystifying Othello altogether. Again, yeah. Yeah, sure.
Because IAGO is not a genius, but if you look at the situation, we have Othello, the colored man, who lives in his society, which literally doesn't know anything about how the relationship between families goes, or how the relationship between this very, very private relationship. He doesn't know how the society deals with this, because of course he's kind of ugly, because all his life outside.
Yeah.
Second, he's in very high position, which all the eyes are on him. At the same time, he's a black man.
Yeah.
In a society full of white men.
Yeah.
So all of these need to build some feeling inside him that he's still feeling that.
The feeling of insecurity, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
But in the other way, you cannot say that this is in his side. Why? Because we can't put put an idea inside someone and feed it every day, every day, every day, taking advantage of his position, of his situation, of his feelings, and then say, no, this is what Othello did is found inside him. No, it's not inside him.
I don't think this is exactly what the critic is saying. I think the idea is that he, yes, did reach a place where he's internalizing. So he has readiness to respond. So Othello's mistake at a certain level is that he internalizes and he shows that he's okay. So had he dealt with the situation and channeled it in a different way throughout and responded to every situation without trying to put this kind of image of himself, then probably things would have been less grave. But the thing is, he tried to act a role throughout to the point where he just kind of couldn't and he exploded. Do you get what I mean? And so, yeah, of course, you throw him into this kind of society and he's there and it's a domestic situation that he basically is not familiar with. Of course, he said at the very end, I was wrought to this. I was brought to behave in this way, that this is not really my true nature. Again, the only nature we know of Othello is this nature in this society. I said this disclaimer at the beginning. I said, would we know when Levi said that he has readiness in him to respond to drama? There are so many ways, by the way, that Othello could have, like there are so many different ways that he could have reacted to every situation from the beginning, but he didn't. He is ensnared to believe when he was brought up in this situation with Desdemona. You have a handkerchief. Someone tells you your wife cheated with Cassio. You didn't see anything. You don't know anything. And then you just don't even talk to her. You go and murder her. What kind of behavior is that? Of course, can we say that he's been basically kind of internalizing this whole time to be brought to that moment? Yes. But did he still have self-agency? Did he have a sense of agency in this? Yes, he did. Because this is a Shakespearean tragic hero. And we said a Shakespearean tragic hero is not like a Greek tragic hero. A Shakespearean tragic hero is a person who still has agency. He can think, he can decide. So when he does what he does it because this is how he decides to behave. Does it mean that he has an inclination to a tragic flaw? Does he have a tragic flaw? Yes. But does he really have to respond to that tragic flaw? No, but he decides to do that. All right. Let's see. Okay, now if we look at the echo scene with Othello, this is where Iago is kind of trying to drive Othello crazy. And again, supposedly you read Act 3, Scene 3. There is this conversation that is going on between these two. And now Othello is kind of suspecting Cassio. And he says, oh yes, and it went between us very oft. He says, indeed. Iago's like, really? Did it go like well? And Othello was like, indeed, yeah, indeed. And then he's, discerneth thou aught is that? Is he not honest? Othello says. Iago says, honest, my lord? Or honest, my lord? Why don't you just answer and say, yeah, he's honest. No, he's not. No, he's kind of trying to mess with his head. All right, he's like, I'm not sure. Anyway, he's telling him, no, he's not honest. But he's kind of trying to be manipulative again. So Othello says, honest, honest. Like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And Iago says, my lord, for all I know, he's honest. Again, he says, for all I know. Like, so he might not be honest, but for all I know, he's honest. Othello says, what dost thou think? He says, think, my lord. Again, when you're echoing someone else, you're trying to basically kind of mess with their heads. And so Othello says, Think, my lord, by heaven, thou echoest me. You're like seriously, you're echoing me as if you are a monster in my head. So, okay, at this point, Othello realizes that there's something off here with Iago. But again, he doesn't think anything of it. So why is Othello ready to accept these insinuations about his wife? Obviously, we have this insecurity, which gives Iago the upper hand here, because Iago realizes Othello's outsider, strange position, etc. And so that kind of gives him the opportunity to mess with him, right? He already knows this man is insecure. We should also, and then you're like asking this question, how can a protagonist, the head of the army, all of that, be insecure? He's an outsider, okay? And as someone puts it, the extravagant and wheeling stranger in this community of Venetians, and as one critic puts it, portrayed as forever homeless. Yeah, he doesn't really have a home. He said, my unhoused free condition. Do you remember? Forever homeless, forever uprooted. What does it mean to be uprooted? Someone takes you from your roots out, and khalas, you never have a home. All right, you don't have anywhere where you belong to. Uprooted and on the move. Like he is. We know he's always on the move. And so incapable. Or at least so his enemies content. This is what they at least think. So of ever being naturalized, we know that he thinks of himself as a Christian. He wants the Venetians to accept him. He wants to be naturalized, to be part of, to basically be able to be considered a Venetian, like everyone, right? Now, will they accept him? Would he be naturalized? No, he is ethnically different forever and ever. It's not that he can go and change his color or change his race. That is something that is going to be there with him. And it's, of course, going to be a problem in this kind of society. Also, so if you add the insecurities, not accustomed, all that, then you add the climate of racism. And he's a middle-aged man. He's not accustomed to being in a domestic scene. He's used to the military world, right? So again, you put all that into the mix, and then you see that why he's ready to respond to things, right? So we're not like really kind of blaming him. We're understanding how things happen. Now, and again, when Iago tells Othello that she did deceive her father marrying you, and when she seemed to shake and fear your looks, See, he's trying to make Othello over and over think, does she actually love me? She probably thinks I'm ugly. Oh, probably she is in love with Cassio. So, okay, I'm confused. Why does she even marry me then, right? So this man has insecurities, and he probably thinks, yeah, maybe she doesn't love me because I'm black, because I'm the racial other, because I am a middle-aged man. So why is she with me? Is she fooling me? What is going on over here? And like Iago, like over and over doing that kind of job of like reassuring him. I mean, Othello is already insecure. He's like, yeah. I'll make it worse for you. I'll make it your worst nightmare. And then basically he echoes Brabantio's warning. Oh yeah. And so reinforcing Othello's insecurities and how attractive he is as a man. Would she really love me? Is she more attracted to Cassio? He's a Venetian, he's young, he's white, he's pretty, he's all of that, right? Okay, so now if you think Othello's insecurities, race, age, lack of experience with women, it all intensifies his tendency to think the worst of the opposite sex, which is women, right? Are we excusing him for his homicidal sexual jealousy? No, but like again, I said, we're explaining it. Now, the thing is, what is interesting, like I said, where we see that this is the basic male view here, Venetian men, of how they think of women. Yeah,